Newsrooms and the journalists that work within them are often under threat, and not all of those threats are visible. Over the last few months, I've interviewed dozens of journalists and editors all around the world, working in places where their colleagues have been killed and where they're under constant surveillance, where leaks are viciously pursued by governments and where private companies aid them in those pursuits. And I've been asking them the same questions. If you can't trust your phone, what can you trust? As we learn more about the pervasive use of mobile phone spyware, it's becoming clear that nobody is protected. Nothing is off limits. The good news is journalists are adapting and they're finding ways to fight this. Some of those solutions are low-tech, using basic forms of code over encrypted channels to conceal their communications and make them more difficult to track, using pen and paper to make them more difficult to track, and even using older antiquated burner phones to make it harder to be targeted. Some of them are extremely high-tech, using iPods for dedicated investigations, using Tails, the incognito operating system, in new and innovative ways to protect sources. None of these solutions are perfect. Nobody claims to have it all figured out, but with the right types of skills in a newsroom, a path through the forest usually can be discovered. All newsrooms, absolutely all of them, need to understand these risks. The new newsroom of today needs to have experts in information security, they need to be training their staff, and they need to be vigilant.
So what does the newsroom of the future look like? In a word, it's multidisciplinary. This has, of course, been true for a very long time, maybe since the beginning of journalism itself. But the mix of disciplines is changing, both rapidly and too slowly. Newsrooms now have data analysts who look at audiences and their habits to better inform the stories we tell and the way we tell them. But they also have data analysts doing reporting on big data, running massive audience participation projects or explaining election results. Newsrooms also have, and increasingly need, designers and developers working together to tell complex stories, explain complex topics like encryption or climate change in ways that are engaging and interactive. Of course, there's still a big role for a simple, well-written yarn in journalism. But if we're not working to give the audience more than 600 to 800 words and a couple of pictures or an embedded tweet, can we really be surprised if they're starting to look elsewhere? The beauty is, with the tools that are already available, it's not too hard to get started. Well-designed, engaging data visualizations, charts and maps are within reach for anyone willing to have a play with tools like Data Wrapper or Flourish. And with the right mindset, these are mere gateway drugs to more technical approaches like Tableau or R-Shiny or even JavaScript. Bringing more technologists into the newsroom isn't just about production though. Concepts like computer-assisted reporting and data journalism and computational journalism have been around for quite a long time now. But the types of skills required to make the most of technology in the reporting process is changing very rapidly, much like technology itself. Data-driven forms of journalism and the programming and analysis skills it requires continues to move closer to the centre of journalistic practice. We see some of the best work emerge where technologists are embedded in small cross-disciplinary teams which include people with all the necessary reporting and production skills like research, design, writing, editing, animation and more. There's a world of difference between a newsroom that treats technologists as outside skill sets to be brought in when necessary and one where they're in the mix from the very beginning. As Paul noted earlier, technology is also central to the threats we face. All journalists need to think about the implications of our networked technological lives in ways that go beyond the production and distribution of our work.
So all of these tools that Simon and I have talked about are great. They're interesting, they're innovative, and when used correctly, they can aid and invigorate our journalism. But I've been thinking a lot over my time during this fellowship about what really matters to me in journalism and in reporting. And what I've been reflecting on, listening to all these fabulous people here in the room, is something that I think is far more important than any one tool or technique. And that's the J word, and not the painfully obvious one, journalism. The other J word, joy. Far too many colleagues, like Laura, who you just heard, burn out. They crash, and these skilled reporters leave journalism altogether. I've seen it happen a lot. It almost happened to me. I've spent years covering Australia's immigration detention system, reporting on stories of abuse, of violence, and of harm. They're painful stories to hear, and like a lot of journalists, I wasn't really equipped with the tools to deal with them. I didn't have the language to talk about my own feelings. The moral harm that we experience telling stories of people caught inside vicious and impenetrable systems is real, and sometimes it's very painful.
These challenges and tools can feel quite daunting. But you know what? Seeing stories come to life can also be a real joy. I used to teach web development, and whenever anybody asked me what they needed in order to get into the job, I told them they needed three things. They needed the desire, and they needed vocabulary, and they needed a community. Well, desire should be really easy. We all already want to tell original, engaging stories, and vocabulary isn't too hard either. We're all already good at words, and it just takes a little bit of reading to extend that to new subject areas. We do that all the time too. Finally, community. Find like-minded people, both in your newsroom, where I know they exist, and in the wider community. Join a local Hacks Hackers group, or take a Night Centre MOOC and get to know the other students.
There's good news though. There is a way through all of this. It's possible to tell difficult stories about great darknesses, to take them in, to learn from them, to stay resilient and to experience joy. The greatest tool we have right now is language. The language to start talking about the big challenges we face. And when you look around this room and hear all these stories, how can you not be hopeful? Thank you.